And now we will hear the perspective from another European country, Slovenia. And we will have Aleksandra and Majic from the University of Ljublijana, Slovenia, to talk about the lessons on socio-economic aspects from the LIFE-project WOLFALPS. Please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I will talk about public support for wolf conservation in the Italian and Slovenian Alps. So my story is not directly connected to the key topic here, but I hope that it will add some content, some spice to the discussions today. I'm also here as a representative of the IUCN. So, the LIFE project that I'm supposed to present here is a quite large project run by Italians, 12 different partners, and we have over 40 official supporters, organizations from different stakeholders, national and non-governmental organizations. The title of the project is Wolf in the Alps, Implementation of Coordinated Wolf Conservation Actions in Core Areas and Beyond. And I will talk a little bit about the history of the project so that I just can, in a more easier way, tell my story about public support. 25 years ago, there were no wolves in the Alps, and 2 decades ago they have started coming back, mostly from the Apennines, here, so to the North Italy and to France, and also from the Dinaric Balkan population. So this here is, maybe I can show so that I can speak for the translators. Back. Okay, so here is Slovenia, and this is northern Italy and France. So wolves are coming from the Apennine population up here, and now we already have wolves also in this region here, Central Alps. Since we were aware that wolves are expanding, we didn't want to focus our project only on areas where wolves were already there. So we used habitat suitability model to identify areas with highest probability that wolves will soon come. So we identified these 7 areas, we call them core areas, and this is where majority of our activities are focused. So one of those is also a public attitude survey that we carried out. That was, we used a quantitative structured questionnaire, very traditional approach to study public attitudes. We targeted general public, so inhabitants of these core areas and key interest groups. And this study gave us a good insight into public support or public acceptance of wolves, although it was aimed as a baseline study for the project so that we can assess at the end of the project again the effectiveness of our information campaign. So the groups that were targeted, first is general public, that we see as our key target group, because it's people that live in the areas where wolves are, and they, knowing how they feel about wolves, is understanding general climate, public climate about wolves. Then we had 2 key interest groups, hunters and farmers, sheep farmers. And also some other groups that are also interest groups, but not as important, and those were high school students, environmentalists, and mountaineers. we have some actions in the project that target those groups, so it was important to include them also in this survey. And now a quite complicated graph, the only one that I'm going to show that's so complicated. So you already heard today that attitudes are a very complex thing, that they are defined by our own experiences with wolves, but information that we get from whom it comes, when and how. So when we are designing a questionnaire, we are basically developing a set of hypotheses, what kind of things contribute to these general attitudes toward wolves. And once we collect the data, we can use appropriate statistical methods to extract some kind of overall scores. And one of those scores that we then interpreted as support for wolf conservation is shown in this graph. This is a result of a model. And you can see, so these are our core areas in the bottom, going from west towards east, and this is a general direction of how wolves come back. And this is this score support for wolf conservation on the y-axis. We have also coded this score in a way that 3 represents a neutral attitude, so to say. So below 3 is opposition to wolf conservation, above 3 is support to wolf conservation. So let's take a look at the general public first as our control group, so to speak. It's the black line, and you can see that goes a little bit above the 3 line. So we can say that general public in these areas where wolves are returning in the Alps is cautiously supporting wolf conservation. Then we have 3 very positive groups. Those are environmentalists. So these are members of environmental NGOs in Italy and Slovenia, mountaineers and students. Then we had hunters that were the most diverse group, going from, they're quite negative in the west and quite positive in the east. So the hunter group is the red line, yes. So you can see how it goes slightly up. And farmers, these are livestock owners, mainly sheep farmers. There's also some cattle farmers, but they all have their animals in the pastures. That's what was important. They, in all core areas, they were opposing wolf conservation. So to take we heard also today that public attitudes or support for conservation drops once wolves come back. And having these core areas where we have in some area territorial packs for 20 years now, in some areas for 2 years, in some areas we don't have any wolves yet, we could also develop a model to check a little bit on how presence of wolves affects support for wolf conservation. And the results were actually quite surprising, because the only group where we found an effect were hunters. And also it's quite important to see that the change or the difference is from where hunters don't have wolves or they're only sporadically present. So these are only dispersal animals that appear, but there are no territorial packs. Their score was above 3, so they were overall even supporting wolf conservation. But in areas where there were wolves present, they were really, you can see the difference is quite high. So this was all other groups, there were no differences. We have expected bigger differences in other groups, especially in other groups, because other groups don't have as much knowledge about wolves as hunters do. So again, hunters, thank you. A very diverse group. So in Slovenia, Slovenia is the last core area on your right-hand side. Hunters are supporting wolf conservation in the Alps, although we have only sporadic wolves coming from the Balkan population. I have to hurry up. And another important groups when we talk about human-wolf conflicts were, of course, livestock owners. And livestock owners, regardless of whether they have wolves in the area or not, were against or not really supporting wolf conservation. So to see in one core area what's happening there, this first core area is on the border between Italy and France. All of the sheep farmers, I'm showing only sheep farmers, have used some kind of protective measures. Almost 80% had livestock guarding dogs. These are good dogs that were also donated through nature conservation projects mainly. Over 90% are using electric fences to close sheep during the night in electric fences. And there are also some other more alternative ways of trying to prevent damages. Does the damage prevention work? You can see the red line is number of animals killed by wolves in this area, only this core area. And the yellow line is the number of wolf packs. So you can see in 2001, 2002, there were only 2 wolf packs in the area, and the peak of damages was the highest then. Now we have 11, 12 wolf packs there, and damages are really mitigated. The damage prevention works, so the conflicts should kind of start to be not as important anymore, but it's not happening. So even when the damages are controlled and are mitigated, it does not mean that the conflicts are resolved. I will skip this one and this one because I don't have time. So what would be the recommendations? The last slide was showing just fear and knowledge, so we think it's really important to continue with objective information sharing, especially to address fear of wolves. Our results also show that fear is still quite an important factor that shapes public support of wolf conservation. We believe that there is a potential to build partnerships with, especially with hunters, for wolf conservation. Something is happening with hunters once the wolves arrive. They start really not liking wolves. We know why, but there is also this brochure about life projects on large carnivores. There are so many, and they were mainly targeting problems in agriculture. So we've discussed how to enhance working with hunters already in our project. We believe that for conservation, coming from conservation project, that there is a potential to do something. And in all these life projects, there is a lot of funds go into mitigating damages in agriculture. And the main justification why do we do it is to gain tolerance, public tolerance of wolves. And it's maybe worthwhile to reassess, at least for our area. It can be very culture and country specific, whether that reasoning is valid and what else can we do. So that's it. Thank you very much. If you want more information you can visit the web page.